Beaten, battered, and afraid for her life. That was the state of a domestic violence victim when she called 911. Thanks for sticking with us here. I'm Nicole Gabe.
And I'm Lois Tomey, in for Russ McCaskey. What happened next launched an internal investigation and officer discipline. But was it enough? Wink News investigative reporter Peter Fleischer pulls back the curtain on a local police case that could have turned deadly.
January 2nd, 2022. A woman calls 911, connecting with the Fort Myers Police Department. She claimed she'd been strangled, held captive for 10 hours by a boyfriend who'd been violent in the past, who she knows to have a firearm. The victim, who spoke with me on the condition of anonymity, describes that horrible night.
He ended up strangling me. Like, he literally, everything was face blows. Every hit to my face, he strangled me to the point that I was losing consciousness.
When he finally fell asleep, she was able to escape.
I literally ran for my life. Like, I opened the door, my keys were right there, and I booked.
My initial reaction was that the victim was not alive. And so that was really the scariest part.
CEO for the Shelter for Abused Women and Children, Linda Oberhaus, was shocked after reading the report.
This victim was absolutely put in harm's way.
Officer Kendall Schaefer responded to the 911 call, meeting the victim in a safe location. A transcript of Schaefer's body camera footage shows Schaefer's mistakes begin almost immediately. After the victim details her abuse, Schaefer incorrectly tells the victim numerous times, "It's up to you if you want to press charges."
I was surprised to see that the law enforcement officer did not go to the home. Even though she said the abuse occurred there, she was strangled there, she was held against her will for 10 hours, there was a firearm in the house, and still the law enforcement officer did not go to the scene.
After talking for over an hour, Schaefer left the victim in her pajamas after taking pictures of her hands and neck. She suggested the victim take pictures of her home when she got back, but did nothing to make sure the victim would be safe at that home.
There was nothing. She just had like a stiff, callous, cold look to her. The police made me feel like this was futile, like it's not going to go anywhere, like I needed to handle it all by myself.
She had reached out to law enforcement and didn't get the help she needed. There was never a pickup order issued. He wasn't held accountable, and he was out there on the streets. And she's lucky to be alive.
The victim told me her nightmare didn't stop there. 1 month later, in early February, she returned to her apartment after walking her dogs. What happened next is out of a horror movie.
I hit something. He was hiding behind the door in my bathroom. And he's like, "You're scared, aren't you?" Like he was very aggressive. He threw me down on the bed.
The victim says she bought herself time and eventually got away from her abuser again.
And I went straight to the police department.
She ended up getting a restraining order against him, but that still didn't stop the problem. Court records show later that month, he broke into her car while she was out with friends, stealing shoes she once bought for him. Finally, after a third terrifying incident, law enforcement acted.
He ended up getting arrested for that. He got taken into jail.
Court documents show the suspect was arrested for burglary and petty theft, for which he got 6 months probation. But it caused a state attorney to review the body camera footage from the initial incident with Officer Schaefer. That case is still making its way through court.
And she was appalled. Advised me to contact Officer Schaefer and have her addend her statement.
Exactly 2 months after the first time she called 911, the victim filed a complaint with FMPD against Officer Schaefer. She says the department eventually connected her to Schaefer for a phone call, but she was shocked at the officer's demeanor.
She was so arrogant and she was so smug. And she's like, "Well, like I said, if they have a problem with my report, they can adjust it themselves," and hung up on me. And I was like, wow.
That quote from Schaefer is confirmed in FMPD's review of the incident.
I'm not sure in this case that the Fort Myers Police Department that we did a good job.
The complaint sparked an investigation from Internal Affairs Commander Lisa Brenneman.
Went right to the body-worn camera video, and upon watching the video, I believed that the complaint that came to my desk was there was some validity to it, and it seemed like there were some policy violations.
FMPD acted quickly. Court records show the suspect in this case was arrested just 2 days later, charged with battery and false imprisonment for the night the victim had endured 2 months prior, a night she'll never forget.
And I just kept thinking, like, my son's never going to see me again. He's never going to hear from me again. Like, this is how I'm going to die.
It's a little scary knowing that there might be officers on the street that are doing a disservice to victims, actually putting them in harm's way.
Brenneman investigated Schaefer's actions. FMPD top brass reviewed the facts and came down with discipline. A 24-hour unpaid suspension, counseling, and retraining. Discipline that was approved by the Police Citizens Review Board 3 months ago. But Officer Schaefer was allowed to keep her job.
It's upsetting. It's upsetting because, you know, negligence obviously carries a lot of consequences in every field. If I was negligent on my job, I would be prosecuted to the extent of the law.
I asked Brenneman how an officer could keep their job after endangering the life of a citizen.
We can all see the big picture in what could have happened, and I think that her discipline goes to show that this is not acceptable. When we have a domestic violence victim, it has to be taken seriously.
It's just challenging for me when you say something's not acceptable and yet she's still allowed to keep her job.
The disciplinary decision rests solely with the chief of police, and that was the decision that he made.
FMPD paperwork shows Interim Chief Randall Pepitone signed off on Schaefer's punishment late last August, nearly 8 months after the initial 911 call took place. But how deep did Pepitone dive into Schaefer's background before making the decision to keep her? Both Pepitone and Schaefer, through the department, declined my interview requests. Back to you.
A police officer responds to a domestic violence case in which a victim says she was strangled and held captive. Yet more than 2 months go by before an arrest is made. Hello again, I'm Lois Tomey.
I'm Chris Safadi. The officer who handled the case was reprimanded but still allowed to keep her job. Week News investigative reporter Peter Fleischer uncovered that officer's lengthy disciplinary file and dives deeper into the department.
This could have ended tragically.
That video is from the Fort Myers Police Citizens Review Board meeting in December 2022, 11 months after the victim first called 911. Bruised and disheveled in her pajamas, the victim told police she'd just escaped a man who had strangled her and held her hostage.
He strangled me to the point that I was losing consciousness, and I just kept thinking, like, my son's never going to see me again. He's never going to hear from me again. Like, this is how I'm going to die.
At this meeting, the review board heard the disciplinary case for Officer Kendall Schaefer. Schaefer responded to that domestic violence call and, according to FMPD, committed several policy violations.
But there's a lot of shouldas, shoulda, woulda, couldas.
Internal affairs docs show she didn't call for an arrest, didn't offer any domestic violence resources, and incorrectly told the victim that it was her choice whether or not to press charges. The victim left her interaction with Schaefer on her own and in fear.
I kind of felt hopeless, and I was scared. I was like, I didn't know where to go. You tend to feel like there's no resources. There's no hope for you.
This meeting was for the review board. It's a group of community leaders nominated by city council members. Their role is to oversee police work, and if an officer violates policy, the board can push for a harsher penalty. Fort Myers Police Internal Affairs Commander Lisa Brenneman spoke at that meeting and was honest about how dangerous Schaefer's mistakes were.
I think with the discipline that the chief rendered in this case, I think that goes to how seriously this was taken and how badly this could have gone.
Schaefer's discipline included a 24-hour unpaid suspension, counseling, and retraining, but she kept her job. Stephen Brown is a member of the review board, the group who approved Schaefer's punishment.
So remember, we're the voice of the people here, but police officers are people too. So we have to look at it from their perspective also.
He says empathy is crucial, also noting the review board heavily weighs the final recommended action that FMPD brass provides.
The decision has to be what we think is best for the community and the police force, but I would guess 99 times out of 100 we're following internal affairs, the chain of command basically.
In this case, the chain of command ended with the interim police chief, Randall Pepitone. We requested interviews with Pepitone and Schaefer to understand how this decision was made, but both of them declined our requests.
It's so disturbing. It's frustrating, it's upsetting, but it's more so disturbing that, you know, the Fort Myers police would keep a person like this employed.
CEO for the Shelter for Abused Women and Children, Linda Oberhaus, says more accountability is needed.
And the whole point is to keep victims safe and to hold abusers accountable for their crimes.
And she feels an arrest should have happened sooner.
The abuser should have been arrested in this case. This was a felony domestic violence case. He should have been arrested.
According to Brenneman, FMPD does use progressive discipline, meaning past record affects any punishment officers receive now.
Their prior disciplinary history is included in the case file when it is forwarded to the chief of police.
But I uncovered Schaefer's disciplinary file and found a long list of issues since she joined the department in 2015. In July 2018, failed to respond appropriately during a critical situation in an officer-involved shooting. In October 2021, she called out sick and then posted a picture of herself at a wedding. In October 2017, failed to locate a handgun on an arrestee before placing him in a patrol vehicle. Officer Schaefer has about a dozen disciplinary actions in total, some of which created major safety issues. FMPD still defends its decision.
I'm not going to make excuses. You know, sometimes officers make mistakes. You talk about why does this officer have her job? Well, she's human. Officers are human. She makes a mistake.
Retraining is a large part of FMPD's disciplinary process. I compiled data from records provided by FMPD and found retraining has been mandated 38 times in the last 5 years. The idea is that officers can still improve, even after crucial mistakes.
Discipline, retraining, counseling, reprimand, you know, was all given to Officer Schaefer in the hopes that we can correct her future behavior.
Some of these officers are making instantaneous decisions, and those decisions may be not perfect to policy. So what we love is the fact that the Fort Myers PD continues to retrain.
Schaefer has already been mandated retraining at least twice before. Once for the loaded handgun she failed to discover, and another for using profane language in the field.
Yes, she has had retraining in the past, but they've been for different issues. She's had to be retrained, but it's not been on the same issues.
But in a life or death situation, like this type of domestic violence case, officers might not get a second chance.
She had so many complaints against her, and that there's no, like, when is enough enough? When is enough to say that this person is just not up to their job?
The victim from this case left Florida shortly after her nightmare experience, but hopes to shine a light that will help others in the future.
It's a complaint that gets put in a folder and then gets forgotten about, and you're allowed to have 12 of them. To me, is disturbing.
FMPD tells me their policies are still consistent with best practices nationwide. They also say they're hiring a detective specifically for domestic violence cases, although that move is not related to this case. Back to you.